Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.
This review covers the Richard Petty Dodge Dart Sportsman. It's a 125 scale kit from AMT, number 819. Originally released back in the 70s, this kit was re-released in 2014. Now the King, as he was known, NASCAR Hall of Famer Richard Petty, probably the most decorated driver in the history of NASCAR, won over 200 career races and 7 NASCAR Cup championships. But he also had other business interests like his Petty Enterprises, which was marketing kit cars from Chrysler. This is a late model kit car, and he used to race it on short tracks down south to use them as a test bed to prove out everything was just right. And he would actually sell these to competitors. The parts in this kit were in pretty good condition. They did a nice job of refurbishing the molds. And when you're finished with it, it'll be about 7.5 inches long, 3.5 inches wide, and 2 inches high. Here are the parts and the layout from the kit. And please remember to heed any of the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines when using any of the products that you see or hear featured in the review. The decals in this kit are very nice. They come off the water in the water slide mode, and they go on very well, but you may still want to use some setting solution on them. There's about 100 pieces in the kit. We're going to start with the motor pieces for this 355 small block V8 racing engine. And the kit is just a single-purpose kit. There won't be extra pieces in here. Go ahead and assemble the block and the oil pan, and clean up any flash parting lines or seams before you paint them. And then paint the block and the oil pan assembly medium, or I should say semi-gloss black. And the heads in the transmission are aluminum. The intake is also with a copper carburetor, and the air cleaner is blue. The exhaust is steel, and the motor mount is Petty blue, and the water pump aluminum as well. The oil pump is steel, and the belts are flat black with steel alternators and a pulley. Now the fan is also black, and once that is assembled, go ahead and set them aside to dry. Now add the intake to the top of the engine and add the air cleaner in place, and then the valve covers. Now assemble the exhaust prior to painting and attach those to the heads. Add the motor mount to the front, and then the water pump. Now on the belt, add the oil pump and the fan and attach that to the water pump in front. Gather up these parts for the interior pan assembly. The interior pan and all the roll bar parts, the headrests, and the oil cooler is painted Petty blue. Now the padding on the cage is flat black, and the seat is flat black inside with an aluminum outside. The aluminum is good for the shifter, and has a black boot and a white shift knob. Now the CO2 can is red with a silver valve, and the oil reservoir is aluminum with a steel top. The fuel cell is red with a steel inlet cover and Petty blue support. Now assemble in the steps according to the instructions, and on the interior pan you can add the seat, the oil cooler, and the shifter. Then add the fuel cell and the oil reservoir. Now attach both side rails to the front holes, and attach the headrest to the plate, and attach that onto the rear roll wall. Now add the rear wall to the chassis pan and add the rear support there. Now include the lateral stiffener and the cross brace, and add the CO2 bottle outside the driver's cage beside the seat. Now the instructions have you build the tires, but we're going to wait till a little later in the assembly process. Now gather up these parts, and we'll continue to work with the chassis now and some of the interior pieces. So continue on by adding the frame and finishing the interior, and we're going to paint all the parts Petty blue except for the dash and the steering wheel, and those are flat black. The padding on the top of the cage is flat black. Now highlight the wires on the firewall with some black or and the master cylinder is steel color. On the dash, paint the instrument panel aluminum with black gauges and white highlighted gauge faces. Just need to remind you, remember to scrape off any paint or glue to get a good bond when you glue parts together at the glue points. Now at this time, scrape that paint off and do a test fit and add the motor into place on its mounts, and then add the shock mount to the inside of the frame rails and attach the frame to the interior pan. The shock mounts then attach to the pan as well. Now add the firewall in place up front and attach the rear stiffeners, then attach the dash support bar to the cage and interior pan. Now attach the dash in place and the wheel to the column and slide it into the hole on the dash mount and put that in place on the firewall. Now add the rear view mirror to the top cage and mount the top cage into place. Here's a view of that construction with the finished interior. It also gives you another view of where the bars are attached, and the motor attaches on the frame so the air cleaner is flush with the indent in the firewall. And the instructions show the suspension assemblies as one step, but I've done this in 2 steps to simplify the build. Locate these parts for the rear suspension and assemble the axle halves, then add the leaf springs to the axle, and then paint this unit flat black after you remove the seams with a red differential housing. Now paint the drive shaft steel and the shocks yellow and aluminum, and paint the brake discs silver with gold calipers. Insert the drive shaft into the transmission and differential and attach the leaf springs to the frame. Now attach the shocks in place on the mount and the leaf springs, and add the brakes into place and onto the axle. Gather up the front suspension pieces and paint the shock supports and the top of the frame petty blue. The shocks are yellow on the supports. A-arms, spindles, lower suspension mounts, and radiator parts are all flat black. The transmission cooler on the radiator is aluminum, and the sway bar and the tie rod are steel. The fan shroud is aluminum, and the overfill tank is white. Now the radiator hose is painted flat black, and the brake discs are silver with gold calipers. Assemble and install the radiator first, and install the radiator hose to the motor and the radiator. Add the fan shroud, place the A-arms in position, and install the shock mounts and the top frames, and let that dry. Add the radiator overflow unit and insert the spindles into the A-arms and attach the lower A-arms onto the frame and the spindle. Now add the brake discs and install the sway bar and tie rod. Now we can work on the tire and wheel assemblies, and the instructions have you paint the rims a dark blue, but the photos that I saw, these were always petty blue, so that's what I did. Painted those petty blue, cleaned them up, and then to create a realistic look on the tires, I just press and roll them on a flat sheet of 220 grit sandpaper, and this kind of roughs up the tread and gets rid of the mold line. The Goodyear logo script on the sidewalls is spray painted on for NASCAR tires, but I just used some dry brushing techniques to kind of give them an impression of paint, and that's kind of really what they look like on the track. When the tires have dried, go ahead and just press those into place on the axle hubs, and there you have a rolling chassis on which to build the rest of your model. So pull these body parts out of the kit and go ahead and clean them up. You know, any mold lines or parting lines, etc., any small amounts of flesh, go ahead and clean that up, get rid of any blemishes, and if they need some fill, go ahead and fill, and you'll have to you use your judgment as you go along there. But we're going to paint these petty blue. There's only one color for number 43. As we mentioned, this is an old mold, and it's old molding technology with large sprue attachment points like you see here. So those will have to be removed, along with the braces that you see on the lower edge of the body there. And there's mold lines on the body near the trunk and support sprue there across the trunk and the front fenders, and take those off and clean them up. Now, on the inside of the hood and the trunk, there's some ejector pin marks that need to be removed if you're doing a contest build or a nice clean build. After a good wet sand with some 800 grit paper, go ahead and spray these parts with a nice coat of primer inside and out, And once it's cured, you're going to, sand it again, look for any imperfections. Then wash the parts off clean and let them air dry. Following that, paint all these parts with your petty blue paint. Now it's time to install the decals, and there are two numbering schemes here for the different versions of the cars that he tested and drove. So you get to choose your option there. Just use plenty of warm water. The decals will come off in about 30 seconds. And then make sure you put them into place and smooth them out with some soft cloth or tissue. Get all the air bubbles, water off of them. And then if you need it, use some of the setting solution to make sure they stick and conform to the contours of the body. After the decals dry overnight, spray them with an overcoat of clear to seal them into position. Now I'm going to add some bare metal foil product to the car for the trim work. And I like to do that, after clear coating the car. Some people do it before. So the foil goes over very nicely when you've got a nice clear coat. And on the hood and the trunk lids and the latch pins, apply some foil. And the latch plates and pins are picked out with a silver Sharpie there. The windows are pretty clear, but I dip them in some of the Pledge Floor Care product, wick it off, and let those dry, and it makes them look really thin and crisp and clear. Install the glass into the body using some white glue or some of the crystal clear product from Micro Scale. When the windshield has set, you can insert the chassis into the body just by kind of shoehorning it in there and pulling the sides apart a little bit over the cage and the chassis pan. You can use these pieces to assemble the rear end. So paint the filler tube steel and install it on the gas tank to the fender, and paint the light covers on the bumper aluminum. Now install the bumper and the lower panel in place, and the trunk sits loose on the body without any glue. On the actual racer, the fender wraparounds were placed in front of the bumpers there on the body. And I just painted those with some aluminum color, kind of freehand the way they are shaped on the box art. But you can also cut out and use some matte aluminum foil to do that as well. And now we can work on the front end pieces. Paint the grille insert and the cover over the lights on the bumper aluminum. Now install the bumper into place and add the lower panel to the body. Paint the spoiler aluminum and install that centered on the lower panel. The hood sits in place but doesn't need to be glued. Paint the exhaust steel and set that aside to dry. When it's done, go ahead and install that to finish up the build. Now your build is complete. Well, there you have it. This is a pretty cool looking kit car from the past. And while the kit was made from old mold technology, if you follow along for parts placement and things here, it won't bother you that there are no part numbers on the sprues, because you can just see where they go. And there's no decal callouts. You just kind of have to use pictures from the internet and the box art to determine where those go. Without some positive glue points, we show you where the pieces fit together. Now, one thing about it, the roll cage was very nice and straight and went together well, which doesn't happen very often. But when you're done with just a little bit of work, you can get yourself a really nice looking car. So if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Hope you like this premium scale model kit review. And so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking on the icon in the lower right of any of our reviews. You can also find us on Facebook and at our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.